So basically, never ever spill water right here on your pants, because then your crush will think like you just wet your pants.
You shouldn't fight with them. Mommy and Daddy get married and they get a lot of kids. Because then they would fight with you and then you'd break up. Like a weekly, at least like one night or something, you like hang out. Like if you're busy all week, to find one night to hang out.
Never ever spend too much money if you're a girl, because then your husband will get mad, and that's the same thing with my parents.
Love me, hug me, be a billionaire. He has to be nice, he has to be mature, and he can't be bad.
1, she's pretty, and 2, she'll agree with me a lot, and 3, will make smart decisions.
Being nice. If she loves me, if she likes me,
Someone with a car.
and Daddy handsome.
So I'll try to resolve around the problem and think what should we do and how would we invest in making that decision.
Yeah, like face-to-face conversations. I'd just take a break of him, then we could start talking to each other again. Happy life, happy life.
That is so awesome. That's actually not just random. That video is not just random. There's a point to it, because where we're headed tonight is a little in line with that, which will make sense in a minute. But if this is your first time to Inside Out, or maybe you've just been here a couple times, welcome. We're so excited that you're here. My name is Jordan, and I get to be the Inside Out director here. And I have a very special guest with us tonight. Not a guest to Inside Out, just a guest to the stage, because Melissa Branch, who we call Mel B in the office, she is our groups director, which means she is responsible for everything small groups, all of the recruiting, all the training, all the caring for our small group leaders. She has a huge passion for creating churches that unchurched people love to attend, and has been a part of student ministry almost 10 years now. So to a large degree, a relationship expert. And so wanted to bring her on stage to get her opinion on a lot of what we're talking about in this series. But we're so excited that you're here. Why don't you introduce yourself a little to people that don't know you?
Thanks, boss. I am so excited to be here, you guys. If I haven't had the chance to meet you yet, like Jordan said, I'm Mel, and I love being with you guys. I honestly think that high school students are the best people in the world. Sorry, grown-ups. But they really are. And I love getting to continue this conversation with you guys, because these are just really near to my heart. You know, actually last spring, my husband and I got the opportunity to help lead a Marriage Matters group and have some really cool conversations there. Plus, like he said, I was a Transit and Inside Out small group leader all the way through. So dating and relationships came up a couple times. So we had some conversations about that, which was pretty exciting. I wanted to tell you guys a little bit about me. So these are my kids. Here they are. Yeah, okay, so there's Noah, Avery, the sweet one, and then Ella, and I love them so much. I love being their mom. They're super fun, super crazy. Some fun video trivia for you guys. The little one on the end there that looks really sweet in the sequins, everything she said was so wildly inappropriate that we had to cut it from the video and we couldn't show it in church. That's a real story. And I also have an amazing husband. Yeah, there he is. Right there. That's the picture version. And the live action version is somewhere back there. Where are you, babe? Yay, there's my boyfriend. He's really hot. He's just standing back there being awesome. I'm super lucky. He is an amazing husband, amazing father, and he does have one flaw. he refuses to take the Enneagram and then talk about it for hours with me. So we're working through that a little bit, but we're not there yet.
Was Noah talking about you guys in that example of spending, or different parents?
I don't know.
Different?
It's a mystery, really.
Yeah. So Target's not
Yeah,
an issue.
I
It's all
don't
good.
know. Target's a dangerous and magical land. I don't know what happens to me when I'm in there, so it's not my fault.
Dangerous magical land is the tagline for
Yeah.
Target. That makes sense. Well, thank you.
New
thank
motto
you
for Target.
For real though. No, I appreciate you being here and putting the time to prep for this. And our kind of hope for tonight is we recognize that in a series like this, as we're concluding our Love Dates and Heartbreaks series, that we have so many different places that we're, coming into this room with, kind of so many different backgrounds of, some of you were just in middle school 6 months ago, and I don't mean that in like a derogatory way. I'm just saying that's a very different place from those of you that are going to graduate a couple of months from now. Some of you have never dated before. Some of you have had lots of relationships before. Some of you are single right now, dating right now. You just broke up with somebody. All of those different places carry a ton of different emotions. And so rather than just talk about like one topic that might help some of the room, we're going to kind of title tonight's message, if you will, the 7 guidelines for a relationship. We thought about, rules for dating, but they're not really rules, and they apply to relationships in general. And this is kind of a collective experience. You could almost say 20 years experience between the two of us, of 10 years in student ministry, of small groups, and being on the other side of students, and one-on-ones that we've had, questions that we've had, small group questions from small group leaders that we've had, our own mistakes, things that we've learned. And what's cool is they're phrased in such a way that they should be like very normal, regardless of how you got here tonight, or regardless of what you believe about God. But as you go through Old Testament and New Testament, they hold up with what you would see in there as well. And so we're really excited to share them with you guys. Our hope is that at least one of them is helpful for where you are at, maybe more than that. And we're just going to kind of have a conversation about them and give some different perspectives to them, and hopefully continue to address some of the questions you guys have submitted throughout the series as well. But I want to jump right into them because there are 7 of them, and I want to leave enough time for small groups and all of that. So our very first guideline, if you will, for relationships is this. It's to prioritize patterns over potential. To prioritize or look for patterns, not potential. So what this means is if you're thinking about dating somebody, or you're evaluating the person that you are dating, you want to look at what they consistently do or what they have done versus what they promise to do differently, what they say they will do differently, or how they will change. This will save a lot of drama. This will save a lot of heartbreak if you do this. Last week, we gave that analogy, and we talked about running a race. And it's this concept of if you were to think about, running a marathon, and at some point in the race, everybody kind of evens out to where everybody's running at a pace to those around them, a similar pace to those around them, because all the fast runners are out up front, and the medium runners are together, and the slow runners are in the back, and it kind of evens out. It's this idea to say some of us, in terms of your maturity or your character or your faith, you're fast, like you're in shape. You're running the equivalent of a 6-minute mile, and you are trying to date somebody who can't run a mile yet, somebody who's at the starting line, somebody who hasn't even bought their first pair of running shoes yet. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with those people, but you don't want to date somebody, allow them to have so much access to your life and influence in your life if they're not running at the same pace as you. Because you guys aren't running in the same direction yet. You're not going towards the same goal yet. You're going to have to stop. You're going to have to turn around. You're going to slow down. You're going to be distracted. You're going to be pulled in different directions. And so you want to look for somebody that has shown their pattern is they're running at the same pace as you, with the same values as you, and they're at a maturity level where it makes sense to have them, be in that important place in your life. Mel, what would you say, even from kind of a female perspective on the first one?
Yeah, I think women are so gifted at helping people realize their potential, and I think we just see the world is better because of that. But I think that can be a little dangerous for us sometimes when we apply that to a guy that is just not right for us. We really have to look at his patterns over his potential, because potential is unpredictable. Like, it could go really, really good, and it could go nowhere. It could go backwards. We don't know. But his patterns are illuminating. They're going to light up what your future would look like with him. Like, is he always angry? And you're like, dang, he's always mad. Like, his anger is coming out all over everybody all the time. Like, I'm so glad it doesn't come out on me. Well, it's going to at some point. Like, are you grossed out by the way that he treats his exes, the other women in his life, maybe even when you're on a date, and the very disrespectful way he talks to the waiter, and you're like, he's not disrespectful to me. Well, he will be at some point because you get to see his patterns. His patterns are what you're really looking at. And I want to be careful to say we absolutely believe that God can change amazing, amazing things in people's hearts and lives. I mean, that's the business we're in, watching God do that. And it's really, really amazing. But I love what Jordan said. Like, sometimes they're just not there yet. They haven't caught up to you yet.
Yeah, I think what we were talking about, like what makes it so difficult is the amount of self-awareness and self-control it would take. Like if you're into somebody, you're excited about them, the feelings are strong, you're attracted to them, every time they walk in the room, every time they text you, whatever it is, to walk away from that because you've recognized that the patterns are not where they need to be for you to be in a relationship with somebody, that's crazy hard. I mean, that takes so much, self-control, that takes so much maturity, and it's really hard to recognize in ourselves. I had to come to the harsh realization my senior year of high school that I was not in a place where I should be in a relationship with somebody. Emily had to break up with me, and we had to be apart for about 6 months before I caught up with where she was in life. And so to recognize that in yourself is really hard. But there was a positive side to this that I want to highlight as well before we move on to the next one. And I've sat across from so many people that have almost felt like there's something wrong with them. They're like, why do I keep doing this? Why do I keep dating that type of guy? Why do I keep being attracted to that girl? Like, I know that's not good for me. The reality is, I think this is a beautiful skill in all of us to see the best in somebody that is going to be great when you're married someday, right? I should not be constantly evaluating all of Emily's faults. She doesn't have very many of them, but I shouldn't be constantly bringing them up and talking about them and dwelling on them and to her for me, right? We should see the best in each other. That's a great marriage strategy. That's a terrible dating strategy to overlook the bad patterns and just hope everything is going to kind of get better, if that makes sense. So that's the first one, is to look for your patterns, not their potential. The second one is this: it's to have more eyes than your eyes on the relationship, which does not mean, post more and show more on social media or anything like that. I'm not just saying tell everybody in your small group every week what's happening, but I do mean a couple of more honest eyes, like truthful eyes, people who will tell you the truth. I think at least, one friend your age and maybe one person older than you that's in a life stage ahead of you that will tell you the things that hurt, that will tell you the things that you don't necessarily want to hear, to say, hey, I'm watching you guys, and it just feels like your goals you had for the relationship have changed a little. I'm noticing some changes in your behavior. I'm noticing that, you're shutting a lot of people out, or I'm noticing you're way more distracted, or whatever it may be. Somebody who will tell you the hard things that you don't want to hear needs to have eyes onto your relationship. I think culturally, a lot of times we think, oh no, that's private, that's my thing, or we're special, like nobody really understands the dynamics of our relationship. And the reality is people have been in relationships for millions of years. There are some, common things that people can see and speak into that are helpful. Nobody can have a healthy relationship solo. We all need people coming alongside us. I don't know what, you would add to that kind of idea.
Yeah, I wanted to share this really, really cool verse that I came across. It's in the book of Proverbs, and Proverbs has a lot of really cool kind of relationship and friendship advice even, so it's a really cool place to start if you're just kind of getting into scripture. Super easy to read, but it's Proverbs 27:6. Wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. So another way to kind of phrase that is hurtful truth is really honoring to your friends. Lying to them to preserve the comfort level in your friendship, or because you don't want to risk something, it's not kind. It's demeaning. Wounds from a friend are much, much less painful than betrayal or being humiliated by that guy or not listening to what they see and you don't see yet. And this kind of hits me a little bit personally because my freshman year of college, I wasn't in the best place, and I started dating a guy. And essentially, he was like a walking red flag with arms and legs and eyes. He was horrible. He was the worst. But I couldn't see it at all. And I had friends that I had grown up with, and they could see everything that was wrong with him. And I was so offended when they spoke into it. And I was like, friends are supposed to support you. This is my relationship. What's all this negativity? But really, had I listened to them and had I broken it off at the very beginning, I would have avoided a lot of very messy and dark consequences that I ended up with. So I would encourage you, if you have trusted friends and you know that they have your best interest at heart, I would absolutely take their feedback.
It's really hard to give somebody that voice in your life where you can listen to difficult things, but it's such a big deal. The third one is this: don't mistreat anyone, even if they don't mind being mistreated. And this will get you very far in any of your dating relationships and in any of your friendships as well. This really comes back to the verse that we actually shared a couple of weeks ago when we did our Q&A panel, the Romans verse, where in Romans 10 it says this: love must be sincere or authentic. Romans 12:10 says love must be sincere or authentic. Hate what is evil, which basically means just don't do anything that you know will hurt other people. Cling to what is good and be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves, which means ultimately every single human being has inherent value or worth. They don't need to prove their value to you. Doesn't mean you need to be in a relationship with them, but we shouldn't intentionally dishonor or disrespect anybody, okay? Here's some things to think about of like how you apply that. I don't want us to do anything that makes us hypocrites, right? Which would mean, guys, don't do things to a girl or treat a girl in a way that you wouldn't want another guy to treat your sister or your mom, right? Don't do that. Don't girls treat a guy in a way that you wouldn't want girls to treat your brother, right? Lying is the same way. Don't lie to somebody, because when you do that, you're saying, I am more important than the truth. I am more important than you in this moment because I want to protect myself or protect the image of myself. There's a really great phrase that Emily and I, our counselors, shared with us in counseling. Granted, it's a little bit more of a marriage thing, but I think it's a great relationship thing. And they said that short-term instability leads to long-term intimacy. Meaning, if I'm honest with you and it upsets you for a night, or it upsets you for a week or a season, in the long run, that's going to be better because I know that we're on the same page. I know we're being honest. I know we're being real with one another. So those kinds of things where you know you're prioritizing you at the expense of the other person on the other side of you, you don't want to do those things in the long run. Mel, I know that you had a couple on the kind of being mistreated side as well that you were going to share.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were talking about this week, but when Jesus came on the scene, he introduced what was a radical idea to the ancient world. He introduced the idea that everyone has universal worth and dignity, and that was just not something everybody knew. Jesus passionately loves us, and he says that we have immense value and immense worth because we are created in the image of God. So knowing that, why would we ever let ourselves be mistreated? Like, seriously, if you're in a relationship right now and that's you, like, take out your phone right now and break up with them. Maybe that's not always a healthy breakup, but if you do it, I'll buy you a present later, because if you're being mistreated, you shouldn't be in that relationship. You need to get out right now, because the danger of staying in a relationship like that is you're going to become accustomed to being mistreated. That is going to become your new normal, and we just can't let that happen. We're not okay with that.
Yeah, I think it is. It's hard for us to wrap our mind around that fact because it feels normal today, but it wasn't until Jesus that everybody had equal value and worth, or until that was commonly accepted. That started with him, and we've been catching up with him ever since. So to treat people that way with any relationship, any friendship, but especially a dating relationship, is so important. That I'm not going to mistreat you. I'm not going to disrespect you. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to pressure you. I'm not going to pressure you physically. I'm not going to pressure you with things, even if it seems like the other person's okay with it. Say, we haven't committed our lives to each other yet. I'm not okay that I might be a regret to you someday. I don't want to create that for you. So even if they seem like they're okay with it, I'm not going to mistreat or dishonor or potentially be a regret for you in the future. Will get you a long way. I love this next one because it's applicable to your whole life and doesn't have to change after you get married as well. The next one is, don't treat anyone who is not your spouse like they're your spouse. Now, that's great when you're married, but here's what I mean from a dating context, right? The fundamental difference between dating and marriage is that in marriage, you have made a commitment for life to somebody. It's this oneness word that we have used throughout the series. Jesus actually talks about it in Matthew 19, and he is referencing a verse in Genesis here. But in Matthew 19, he says, "For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh." The way that's talked about in the New Testament is it's this great mystery. It's like our lives are becoming one. Our homes are becoming one. Our families, our finances, our schedules, our bodies are becoming one. There is this intimacy and this connection that is created in marriage that is unique to marriage. So don't one things that shouldn't be one yet ahead of time, right? Now, culturally, like financially, you wouldn't probably share a bank account when you're dating. Like we get that culturally, but everywhere else culturally, we'd probably blur those lines. Like, I don't know if you knew, for example, but you are significantly more likely to end up divorced if you live with somebody before you marry them. 40% more likely if you live with them before you marry them. That's so interesting because in our culture, that's just so normal now. That's like, well, you're talking, you're dating, at some point in the future, you move in together, you get engaged, you get married someday. That just seems so normal. But you're 40% more likely because you've started to build some habits and some patterns and some rhythms with somebody that you haven't made that lifelong commitment to yet. And it can be so incredibly difficult to undo those habits and those patterns over the course of marriage. That would be one of those. That's why we talked about the physical element multiple times throughout this series. The fact that you would want to create that bond and that connection and that intimacy with somebody that may not even be a part of your life someday in the future, and that you could potentially create that regret for them in that moment. Those are examples of things to say, hey, don't treat somebody who you're not married to like you are married to them. I think the other thing kind of goes back to that patterns thing that we talked about in the beginning. Again, overlooking it's not really overlooking in marriage, but working through faults is great in marriage. Forgiveness, for faults is great in marriage, processing those things. But when you're dating somebody, red flags on a beach mean there's imminent danger. A red flag on a racetrack means stop the race. You do not want to ignore red flags in a relationship because you're not committed to them for life yet. So I think that's another one, incredibly helpful, and will get you really far. The next one, Mel, is actually going to handle on her own, and that is don't do anything now that you know you'll regret later.
Yeah, so I want to be really careful with this guideline because I know how easily it can sound kind of judgmental or restrictive or maybe even a little unrealistic. But what we want you guys to think about is that you are constantly writing your story. Every single thing you do goes into your story. Have you guys ever thought about that before? It's kind of crazy, kind of stressful, really, if you think about it. It's every date, every party, every relationship, every hookup, every breakup is going into your story. And we don't want you to add anything to your story that you wouldn't be very, very proud to share with anyone. We want you to be crazy proud of your story. We don't want you to add chapters that you want to kind of rip out or skip over. And I heard a phrase the other day that I wanted to share with you guys, and it sounds a little harsh, but it's memorable. Don't do anything that would make you a liar for life. And what that is trying to say is don't add anything to your story that you would be tempted to lie about in a future relationship. When you're sitting down with your husband and wife and you're going over your past relationships, you want to be able to be proud of everything that you talk about with them. And there's just one thing that I can promise you guys, being on the other side of marriage, I just never have looked back over my past exes and thought, I wish I had slept with more of them. What was his name? If we had slept together, that would have been a better relationship. Or maybe I should have piled up 4 or 5 more one-night stands in college or something like that. I just promise you that those things, that's just not a thing. You're just never going to regret that.
Yeah, I think it's important to reiterate from the guy's side as well. I didn't know, if I wanted to share this or if this is okay, but I do remember, I remember being a high school student in Inside Out, listening to an idea like this. And I remember then being on stage as the Inside Out director before I was married and saying something like that. And so I'd heard this a couple times from important people in my life. And I vividly remember the day after my wedding, waking up next to Emily for the first time in my life. And I looked over at her and she was still kind of sleeping. And I remember thinking about that exact idea of, oh my gosh, like it is so true. There is nothing in any fiber of my being that desires, like, gosh, I wish I had more people to compare her to right now. Like, I wish there was somebody else on my mind. I wish there were other expectations that I had. And it's just so incredibly strong and true. So I just think from a guy's perspective too, it's so important to think about and that, to hear that, regardless of what your past has looked like in that area, you have the opportunity to write your story going forward. And so, let's see, I think we're on to number 6 already, which is cool because that gives us just a couple more left here. But the number 6 is to prepare most for what's most important. Here's what I mean by this. We will spend so much time over the course of 0 to 18 practicing our sport or our instrument or our craft or dance or whatever our interest or hobby is. Even more if you continue that in college, and even more if you do it professionally. You will spend a ton of time preparing for a career. Some of you will go to school for 4 more years after high school, and some of you more than that, right? Some of you prepare an incredible amount for video games. And what you can do with a controller is truly extraordinary. Like, it is mind-blowing, right? And we prepare for these kinds of things. But then we say that this relationship should be one of the most important people in my life when I'm dating and the most important person in my life once I'm married. And so often in our culture, it is just so common to drift to the next phase of a relationship. Like, we kind of like each other and then we like start dating, and I don't know, we've been dating long enough, we should get married, and what's next, and should we have a kid? I mean, it's so common to just kind of drift to these stages. But what would it look like if we did prepare, we were intentional about our own character, our own self-awareness? If you're not prioritizing your faith now, it's not a whole lot likelier that you'll do that later when you're more busy and there's more priorities in your life. So think about, what would that be? I was convicted just thinking about what goes into one Inside Out, the 90 minutes that is Inside Out. I mean, 6 months in advance, we talk about the content that's happening 6 months away. And then there's monthly checkups from there. And then we're trying to do the creative elements about 6 weeks in advance. And then there's meetings that take place the week of to lock that Inside Out and prepare for it. Then after Inside Out happens, we evaluate every single Inside Out to figure how it is that we could get better in groups and in large group. There's so much intentionality that goes into one. We take a retreat every single year to do a one-day offsite and talk about what's the one thing we need to get better at next year. And I was like, when's the last time I took a one-day offsite to plan the next 2 months of creative date nights for Emily, right? I've never done that. I've never done that. I have, because I felt guilty about that, gone to a coffee shop and just said, I'm just going to think about date nights with Emily at this coffee shop and what they should be, because I felt bad about it. But I'm like, that's crazy. We're like, we would never do that. But why? Why, if relationships really are, and if someday marriage is number one, why would we not do things that are probably a little countercultural and be intentional in a way that we probably don't see a whole lot of other people doing? I had actually a really memorable meeting with a guy, an upperclassman guy, just a couple months ago. And the reason it was so memorable is because he said he wanted to meet and he wanted to talk about his girlfriend, which I was pretty confident that meant that he was either going to tell me something he was guilty about or he was going to break up with her, because that is usually how those go. And I sat down and he met with him and he said, hey, I've been dating this girl for a little while. I really like her, and I really don't want to mess it up. Can you tell me how not to mess it up? I was like, that is awesome. You have to know, just asking that question, initiating that question is so rare. It's not normal. It is countercultural. And I think if you are going to prioritize being ready for a relationship, being clear about the goals, being clear about boundaries, being clear about your intentions, I think that's probably going to look a little different than the way you see a lot of your friends doing it. But I think at the end of the day, it's worth it to have a different kind of relationship in the long run. So prepare most for what's most important is number 6. Before we put number 7 up there, I do think, I have a verse for that one too that I wanted to share just because it's so simple. Galatians 6:7 says, a man reaps what he sows. I like this idea. It's actually a farming kind of concept, but it's the idea that you receive or you get back what you put in or what you work for. Like if you were to plant, a different, kind of crop, you don't plant corn, but you expect corn, like that would be really weird. Like that whatever you put in, that's what you're going to get back. So if we have a string of unhealthy relationships, to just expect that one is magically going to be healthy and great would kind of be crazy, right? We know that we have to prepare differently. So I think that verse is just so simple but so helpful with that kind of a preparing or intentional concept. But the 7th one, before I put this one up, I just know it's going to have the potential to maybe, of all the ones, some of the ones we've already put up is controversial. I think this one could be the most controversial. I think it will ruffle some feathers. It may upset some of you. I'm okay with that. It is okay if you disagree with me. That's why we have small groups. You can go and disagree in the context of your small groups. But I wanted to leave this for the end so that we could go to our small groups right after and we can talk about it. Number 7 is this. guys ask girls on dates, okay? Here's why we wanted to end with this one. There are multiple layers and multiple levels to this one. One is just speaking to the clarity. Just be clear. You want to hang out, you want to come over, my parents won't be home later. That's not clear, okay? Be clear about your intentions. Be clear about what your time is going to look like. Be clear about what your goals or your boundaries are for a relationship. That is just one element of this to say that's so important. Guys, if you're nervous that you can't tell her that you're attracted to her, that you want to go on a date with her because you're afraid that once you do, she's not going to be interested anymore because she loves to play hard to get, she's not ready to date. She's just not ready to date. Look for somebody who's more mature and who is ready to date. That's okay. Guys, I push on you all the time. Girls, I don't push on you as much. But that would be an example to say, if she's turned off or turned away by you being real with that, then she's just not ready. Also know, guys, you will get rejected if you do this. And it's good for us. We should go through it. We should experience it. It'll strengthen our character. We'll get turned away from sometimes. Girls, it is okay to say no to a date. That is so fine. But guys, know when you do that, keep honoring her. Okay, if she's the most amazing girl in the world 5 minutes ago, and then 5 minutes after she says no to you, you're bashing her to all your friends about how much you hate her, that's craziness, and it makes you look crazy, not her, okay? So honor her. If you get rejected, just take it like man, and you start to learn, and it's fantastic. That's great, okay? But I also know I could have put ask each other out on dates, and I didn't word it that way. I put guys ask girls out on dates. Is it wrong for a girl to ask a guy out on a date? No, that's not wrong. Girls, yes, you can do that. You're empowered to do that. That's fine. But here's the thing. Generally speaking, and I know this is a generality, you see this start in Genesis with Adam and Eve and probably every guy you've met after that, our fatal flaw is passivity. We tend to not do the things that we don't want to do if somebody doesn't make us do them. So the standard for your relationship is going to start from the beginning. And if the standard is he didn't have to be intentional with you, he didn't have to impress you, he didn't have to win you, he didn't have to fight for you, he's never going to do that. So make that be the standard from the beginning because that's going to set the tone over the course of the rest of the relationship. And guys, I do think it's really important, just to be real with you, I am a guy, so I understand this, okay, and I understand the tensions with this, and I want you to hear from me. I've talked about Emily and I's stories before in terms of how high school dating Emily was dramatically different from college dating Emily, and I messed it up in all kinds of ways throughout the course of high school. It was super unclear about my intentions, about the state of our relationship, around boundaries, and all of those kinds of things, and it was just chaos, and it hurt both of us over the course of that time. College, after we'd broken up for 6 months, a lot of things had changed, a lot of important mentors in my life, and I had asked her out again and was way different, much more intentional, certainly not perfect, but way more intentional, way more clear. I really need the guys in the room to hear, genuinely, what I thought it was going to be was like this period of suffering where I made it better for Emily and I knew it was the right thing to do and I could get through it and finally the boundaries would go away or we'd get married and all this kind of stuff and be so exciting. I genuinely believe that it was as good, if not better, for me as the guy in that time period than it was for her. And here's why. When we would hang out, when we would go on a date, I wasn't wondering the whole time we were together, is one of our parents going to be home when we get back? Are her roommates going to be around? You know, are we going to, what is this going to look like? I was just present because I'd already told her this is how the night's going to end. This is what our day's going to look like. And I was just able to be present and focus on the date. And that was really, for the first time in my life, when I really started to get to know Emily. And I got to see how hilarious she was and how much chemistry we had. I got to see how smart she was, how caring she was towards others, her incredible character. We became genuinely friends in this time period. And not in some kind of boring, awkward friendship way, like a fun, flirty friendship way, but she became my friend in this time period. And as the dude, it was awesome. It was so much fun, and I just had a clarity that I'd never had before. And so if you think this is about making her, I'm challenging the guys more than anything in this to say, this is awesome, and this has extraordinary results for you as well. But I know, Mel, it was really important for you to speak into the girl side of this also and what this feels like for girls. So what would you kind of add on to that?
Yeah, actually, I wanted to take just a tiny second because I thought it might be interesting for the guys to kind of hear an inside perspective on what girls think when you ask us on a specific planned date. We get excited. We feel respected. Do you know what girls think is hot? Respect. We like it, right? See, we like it. We like it a lot. And when we're also very into security and certainty. We're real into that too. But when we know what to expect, it alleviates so much anxiety for us. And you're going to get the best version of us on that date, and that's good for all of us. So, ladies, my advice to you is pretty simple. Say yes to dates, not to hangouts. You don't want to hang out. I know you don't. Gross. Don't pretend you do. I know when you get that text, you're like, yeah, I'd love to. No, you don't. Know your worth. Set that bar high in the beginning and keep it high. So you need to say yes to dates and say yes to men acting like real men for you. That's my last thought.
Yeah, y'all can give that applause if you want to. Absolutely. Here's how I want to end this slide in this section, and I definitely don't want to get political or controversial with this or anything, and I know that this is a hot topic right now and should be in our culture in so many ways, but if great men is ever going to be the norm in our culture, which it's not right now, if great men is ever going to be the norm, like it's normal to see great husbands, it's normal to see engaged, involved fathers. It's normal to see great men in the workplace who are kind and honest and have great integrity and are generous. If that's going to be the norm, it has to start somewhere. And it has to start with some generation. And I don't know why we should wait for 100 years and hope something's magically different 100 years from now. I don't know why it can't start with this generation. And I don't know where else to look or where else to expect it to start than in the church, where we are led by the greatest man that has ever lived in the person of Jesus. I don't know where else that would start. And ladies, the reason I don't think that's controversial to say is because I think when men get better, everything gets better. And here's why. Weak men, passive men, low character men take advantage of women, abuse women, disrespect women. High character men, men of integrity, men who are kind and are strong and are generous, great men honor and respect and elevate and empower the value and the dignity and the worth of women. I think if we had great men as the norm, it would be better for everybody. So men, young men, I think this is possible for every single one of you. I think this should be the goal for every single one of you. I think it is worth figuring out what it looks like to become a great man. Because I promise you, nobody in this room, none of you know exactly what that looks like yet. And I'm not demeaning that. I'm saying I'm on that journey with you of trying to figure out what does it look like to be a great man. I'm in this with you. But I think it's worth everything you have to figure out what does that look like, what does that mean, who can help me get there. And I think the implications are massive and significant and could be a game changer, not just here at Inside Out, but in our culture and our schools where we live. And I get excited about that kind of future. So I wanted to end with that. I think it's very important and a very important way to walk away from this series. Again, the whole point of small groups is you have freedom to disagree with anything you heard, freedom to ask for clarity on anything, freedom to check in on how you're doing with these or add to, and that's why small groups are so incredibly important. So I want to pray for us. I want to wrap it real quick, and then we'll head to those groups. Heavenly Father, God, I know we shared a lot of different things, not even just tonight, but throughout this series, and I know that's going to land in all kinds of different ways. Some of these things are good reminders. Some of these things are things we've just never heard before, and so we're confused and we're wrestling with this. Some of these things we disagree with, and I just ask that you would lead our conversations, allow us to be honest and real, and at the same time kind with one another and respectful of one another's opinions, and ultimately discover what you have for us, what's best for us. You've designed relationships, and you want what's best for us, so I ask that we can take steps and have the courage and boldness to take steps in that direction. God, we love you. We need you, and it's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.